All right, today we're going to step away from the usual business school case studies and dive into something way more provocative. We're talking about Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. Now, this isn't going to be just a summary. Think of this as a professor's deep dive, a critical analysis of a book that's less of a textbook and, honestly, more of a manifesto on how to build the future. So, let's get into it.
The entire philosophy of this book, and I mean the entire thing, is built around this one single, powerful question. Thiel famously used it in interviews, but it's so much more than that. It's really a diagnostic tool. It's designed to find people who can actually think for themselves, who can spot a secret that's hiding in plain sight. He argues that a great answer to this is the real starting point for any 0 to 1 idea.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to tackle Thiel's most controversial idea. The competition is basically a dead end. Then we'll unpack what the 0 to 1 blueprint actually is. After that, we'll get into a balanced critique, the brilliant and the, problematic sides of the book. Then we'll apply all this theory to a real-world showdown, and we'll finish up with a practical toolkit you can actually use.
So right out of the gate, Thiel basically lobs a grenade at decades of economic theory. You know that idea from Econ 101 that perfect competition is the ideal market? Thiel says, nope, that's a nightmare. Let's dig into why.
Think about it. In a perfectly competitive market, every company is pretty much selling the same thing. So what happens? They're forced to compete on price, and they keep undercutting each other until the profit margins just shrink down to nothing. Thiel loves to point to the U.S. airline industry as a perfect example. Over its entire history, it's created almost zero lasting value for anyone investing in it because it's just stuck in this brutal, competitive death spiral.
So if competition is the enemy, what's the goal? Well, it's what Thiel calls a creative monopoly. Now, it's really crucial to understand this is not the kind of monopoly that gets the government to protect it. No, this is a company like, say, Google in search. They are so much better than the next best thing that they just don't have to worry about competing with Bing. And that freedom, that's what lets them take all those profits and invest in a 0 to 1 future like, say, self-driving cars.
Okay, so we get it. The goal is to build a monopoly. But how? How do you actually do that? This next section breaks down the core concepts of Thiel's framework for creating something that is truly new. Now, this slide right here, this is the heart of the book. It's the title, right? 0 to 1. So 1 to n is what he calls horizontal progress. You take something that works and you just make more of it. Think globalization, franchising, making things more efficient. 0 to 1, on the other hand, is vertical progress. It's technology in the broadest sense of the word. It's creating something brand new where there was nothing. Thiel's whole argument is that we've become obsessed with horizontal progress and have kind of forgotten how to do the hard work of vertical progress.
Building on that, a durable monopoly is no accident. Thiel says it's got to have some combination of these 4 things. First, your tech can't just be a little better, it has to be a leap, like 10 times better. Second, your product should actually get more useful the more people use it. That's network effects, like Facebook. Third, it should get stronger as it gets bigger, like Amazon's massive logistics network. And finally, your brand has to become so powerful it's basically synonymous with the product itself.
And this, right here, is one of the most brilliant frameworks in the whole book. Thiel argues that for the last few decades, the U.S. has been stuck in what he calls indefinite optimism. We kind of feel like the future will probably be better, but we don't have a concrete plan for how to get there. And what does that lead to? Well, we hedge our bets. We go into finance or consulting instead of starting bold 20-year R&D projects. 0 to 1 companies, he says, can only be built by definite optimists, people with a bold vision and a real plan to make it happen.
All right, so now let's put on our critical thinking hat for a minute and see how these ideas really hold up. Because from a professor's point of view, this book is both an incredibly powerful tool for thought, and at the same time, it's deeply flawed.
On the one hand, its strengths are huge. It is a fantastic cure for that kind of incremental, by-the-book, MBA think that just obsesses over tiny efficiency gains. It forces you to ask much bigger questions. Instead of seeing business as this zero-sum war for market share, it reframes it as a positive sum game of creating completely new value for the world. It gives you a philosophy, not just a checklist.
But, and this is a big but, the weaknesses are just as significant. The entire book is kind of filtered through the incredible once-in-a-generation success of Thiel and his PayPal mafia buddies like Elon Musk. That's classic survivorship bias. It also kind of dangerously hand-waves away the very real downsides of monopolies, anti-competitive behavior, privacy issues, all that stuff. And finally, it's got a strong case of Silicon Valley myopia. It's a great playbook for a tech startup, but applying these lessons to, say, a manufacturing firm in Ohio, that's a lot harder.
So to make these ideas less abstract, let's apply this 0 to 1 lens to a really compelling modern contrast from the auto industry. This will show you exactly what Thiel means in practice.
This is just a perfect illustration. Tesla made a 0 to 1 leap. What was their contrarian truth? It was that an electric car didn't have to be a glorified golf cart. It could be better than a gas car in every single way. And they started by completely monopolizing a tiny niche, the high-performance electric sports car. Meanwhile, pre-bankruptcy GM was the ultimate one-to-N company. Their innovation was badge engineering, selling the exact same car under 4 different brand names. They were completely trapped in that profit-killing competition Thiel was talking about.
And look, if we map Tesla onto Thiel's monopoly playbook, the fit is almost perfect. Their battery and software tech was a 10x leap forward. The supercharger network, that created a powerful network effect. As they scaled manufacturing, they could lower costs in a way nobody else could touch. And their brand, well, it became one of the most powerful in the world. They didn't just join an industry, they created a whole new one.
GM's failure is even more telling when you remember the EV1 from the 1990s. They actually had a revolutionary 0 to 1 product, and they killed it. They literally recalled them from customers and crushed them into scrap metal. Why would they do that? Because they were an indefinite pessimistic organization. They couldn't imagine a definite future where electric was the only path forward. Their collapse wasn't just about the balance sheet. It was a total failure of imagination, the logical end of a one-to-end mindset.
So what does this all mean for you, assuming you're not out there founding the next SpaceX? Well, this final section is all about translating Thiel's philosophy into a practical toolkit that anyone, and I mean anyone, can use. Here are 4 things you can start doing. First, in your very next meeting, ask that contrarian question. Gently challenge a core assumption everyone takes for granted. Second, do an audit of your company's strategy. Is it a definite, concrete plan, or just a bunch of vague hope? Third, find your own niche monopoly. Can your team become the absolute, go-to, indispensable provider of a certain skill inside your company? And finally, maybe the most practical one of all, stop aiming for 10% better. Ask what a 10 times better solution would look like. That question alone forces you into 0 to 1 thinking.
So, what's the final verdict from the professor's chair? For me, this is absolutely required reading. Now, it is not a step-by-step guide, and it is certainly not perfect. It's a polemic. It's really a philosophy book disguised as a business book.
And this, right here, is its greatest value. Thiel's goal isn't just to help people build monopolies for the sake of it. It's to shake us out of our one-to-N complacency and remind us that creation, that singular, magical moment of going from nothing to something, is the most important thing we can do in business.
So I'll leave you with that question. In your company, in your industry, right now, what is that important truth that very few people agree with you on? What is that secret hiding in plain sight that could unlock a 0 to 1 future? Finding the answer to that, well, that could be your 0 to 1 idea. Thanks for tuning in.